I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents Week in Review. The week ended much as it began, the living paying tribute to the dead. Bells tolled across the nation 26 times to honor the angels and heroines of Newtown, Connecticut, 1 week after they were massacred. We'll have more news on Newtown in a moment, but first we turn to Brooklyn, where a legend in learning was laid to rest today, the funeral of Dr. Frank Macchiarola.
Today we're at the Cathedral Basilica of St. James, and we're here for the funeral of Frank Macchiarola, Chancellor of St. Francis College and former Chancellor of the Schools of the City of New York.
A great family man, a great man of religion and God, and a great man for education and for this city and this state and nation, and a great loss.
I think he'll be missed for his wisdom, for his love of everyone, for his incredible generosity of heart, generosity of spirit.
Through the beauty of simplicity, selflessness, and a deep devotion to God, it was a lesson that he imparted to all of us, especially in his last days. Real success does not come in this life.
His faith, I think, inspired him. He would unabashedly tell his students, God wants you to be a saint. He wasn't afraid to say that. He believed it.
He was a person that made you feel good about what doing the best you could with the talents that God gave you.
He was a brilliant man. He predicted the city's fiscal crisis of the mid-1970s and tried to shape the intellectual basis behind how you had to approach getting out of it. And I think that his work in that regard helped to save the city.
He had a profoundly positive effect on thousands and thousands of children, which out of his love, but it's also a great benefit to the city and the state and the country. It's just, that's the notion of service.
Working alongside many of the titans of New York's political, business, and academic life, my dad showed that public service is a noble calling. And when done right, the positive and the force in the lives of other people can be real.
Belief in all children, but also, Frank set standards. I remember him, putting programs in place that, said children needed to achieve before they would move forward. And I think that's important and something that we've come back to over the years.
But more important, he lived his life as a good Catholic, and he didn't have to preach to be a good Catholic. Just the way he lived his life was a demonstration to everybody as to what it meant to be a good Catholic and to be able to be in the world and to bring your Catholicism into the world.
The push for new gun controls grows in the wake of the Newtown nightmare. The U.S. bishops are repeating their call for responsible restrictions on the sale and use of firearms. The president again is vowing to do everything in his power to reduce gun violence. But the National Rifle Association today said they oppose new gun laws but support armed police inside every school. From everywhere, Americans want to help the people of Newtown. And one lady drove to Connecticut all the way from Iowa, bringing with her a simple gift, pies, in the hope of bringing comfort.
Pie represents so many things. It's simplicity, and it's nurturing, it's comfort food. I drove from Iowa on Saturday. Plates, forks. This is our third day handing out pie. This is only half a pie. And after I posted a comment on Facebook about saying, gosh, if it would help the people of Newtown for me to come and make pie for them and it would make them feel better, then I would do it. It's still hot. It was made at the Newtown High School by the high school kids today. We taught a class. So these are just straight out of the oven. So you guys could start cutting slices if you want. I lost my own husband 3.5 years ago, and mine was a sudden loss, so I understand the pain, and I think that was part of what drove me to come here. And you gotta have some though, come on. I wrote a whole book about it. That's how, and pie helped me get through my grief. You want some pie? It's warm. I was nervous that people would think we were imposing.
The pie is excellent, but the idea is even better.
The reaction has been the opposite. Nice. They've all been so grateful and so appreciative.
I think this is beautiful. I mean, you can only do a little bit, but you know, you do what you can. Everybody does a little bit, and it means a whole lot to everybody.
It's been a privilege to be here, to be able to do something. People are hurting and feeling bad all across the country about what happened here, and they want to help. They care. There's so much compassion and love out there in the world.
And that American compassion and love is also being shared with our neighbors still struggling to recover after Hurricane Sandy shattered their lives nearly 2 months ago. Catholic Charities of Ohio is sending a check for almost $185,000 to storm victims. Help gratefully received, especially on Staten Island, where they hope and pray that they are not forgotten.
We thought we were going to lose our lives.
In an instant, just gone. I'm going to lose my mind. You're like, what?
There was nothing you could do.
I can't even explain. You don't understand. We need help.
This is one of the toughest times that I ever faced in my life. The people really didn't know the devastation that actually occurred on Staten Island firsthand, because you really needed to be here to really see it with your eyes. You needed to be down seeing people's lives destroyed. If I just sit back and make like this didn't happen, I'd be lying and fooling myself. I will be there for my community, and there's thousands and thousands, millions of people just like me that are out there looking to, you know, help and rebuild.
Would you like some food? You want this one?
I gave them a promise I would stay until they didn't need me anymore. They come for their hot foods, their supplies. We go out, we make sure they're clean, you know, if they need any help, cleaning, demolition. Seeing the people, seeing the tears, holding them while they were crying, it really touched home. And I could see they really needed somebody to see every day, knowing that if it was one person, that one person was there for them and wasn't going to leave him back out on them.
In these hard times, it touches your heart deep down inside, that knowing that there's people out there that care.
When I go home at night, I can put my head on the pillow and go to sleep, knowing that it actually helps a whole bunch of people feel better about their situation, maybe just a little bit.
Just don't forget us. Keep us in your heart, in your prayers, in your thoughts. If you could help the people out of Staten Island in any way, please do.
And yesterday, the next step in recovering from the storm started on Staten Island, the demolition of homes. The Army Corps of Engineers expects to tear down about 400 properties that can no longer be lived in. Meantime, today, full service was finally restored on the R subway line. The connection between Manhattan and Brooklyn is back. And please remember, you still have the opportunity to help make Christmas a little brighter for the storm victims. Our diocesan newspaper, The Tablet, is conducting its Bright Christmas campaign for the 40th year in a row. This year, the focus is on the victims of Hurricane Sandy. Gifts may be sent to Bright Christmas in care of The Tablet at 1712 10th Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11215. And as the folks on Staten Island remind us tonight, don't forget the victims. We remember that last year, an earthquake, the most powerful to ever hit Japan, killed 15,000 people. Just yesterday, a large dock from Japan washed onto our Pacific shore. The Japanese people still suffer and fight to recover. In one of the hardest hit areas, to make Christmas a little brighter for the children, volunteers organized a visit yesterday by Santa Claus. We want to share with you the scenes of Santa arriving by helicopter in the elementary school yard, but we particularly want you to enjoy the joy of the children.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. あ、じゃあ私にくださいな。私にください。メリークリスマス。
Absolutely wonderful images. Up next, Christmas and the Bishop of Brooklyn. Welcome back. A wild wind and rainstorm made a mess of our area this morning. A 5-story scaffold collapsed in Bensonhurst. Power was knocked out in many places. Planes, trains, and car traffic all disrupted. The bad weather coming from the middle of the country, and it's expected to be with us for much of the weekend. These pictures are from Wisconsin. The postal workers charged with delivering the Christmas mail and the packages wouldn't let the snow stop them. Up to a foot fell in blizzard conditions there. For our area, only snow showers are predicted for tomorrow, but the winds are expected to remain pretty strong. Strong Christmas criticism for the governor of Rhode Island tonight. He's won the 2012 Scrooge Award from the Becket Fund. They're a law firm that defends religious liberty, and every year they pick out the public figure responsible for the dumbest thing against Christmas and Hanukkah. Governor Lincoln Chafee wins this year after deciding a Christmas tree is not a Christmas tree, but instead a holiday tree. The Diocese of Providence held a tree lighting just 1 block from Chafee's office. Of course, the tree was a Christmas tree. Cleaning up in anticipation of Christmas is a chore for all of us, but at St. Peter's Basilica, cleaning the massive bronze canopy over the main altar is a really big job. A special team of Vatican workers in harnesses are lifted 100 feet into the air. The canopy, by Bernini, weighs 63 tons. The angels are 13 feet tall. The workers do this twice a year, before Christmas and Easter. And once a week, we're joined by the Bishop of Brooklyn as Bishop DiMarzio takes us into the deep. Tonight, he and our news director, Ed Wilkinson, talk about Christmas.
Bishop, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Nice to have you here. And this week in your column, you wrote a bit about Pope Benedict's book about the infancy narratives. And I was a little surprised about how much press it got because he talked about the date of Christmas. You know, people seemed surprised that it wasn't zero, you know. So, I mean, that's nothing new, right?
No, that's been a controversy that's gone on for a long, long time. But when someone like the Pope brings it to everybody's attention, well, then it's news. There were a couple of other things in there that made some slanted headlines. The issue of the not being sure that there were animals in the stable or the cave, but there's no mention of it in the scripture. But we're presuming that it's there, and I know for sure it's there because my grandmother told me that it was the heat from the breath of the animal, the donkey and the cow, that kept Jesus warm.
Well,
so I have no doubt about it.
Hey, what difference does it make if there were animals there? Were there shepherds? Were there magi?
Well,
that's in the scripture.
The Pope
right?
would come out and say, yes, of course, that's in the scripture. We don't add anything, don't take anything away. But there are people who don't believe it even happened, that it's some kind of a myth. But we know that's not true.
What were the gospel writers trying to convey with the Christmas story?
Well, first of all, they wanted to give the circumstances of the birth of Jesus. I think that was important. The story of the Annunciation precedes it, which is truly important. Well, they were trying to give you the aspect of faith, of belief, of the incarnation, and what that's about. The details that surround it were of secondary importance. The real thing was to recognize that God became man and how this happened in human history. So that was their purpose.
There are even some people who question whether or not it really happened in Bethlehem.
That's true, but the Pope took on that little controversy and worked through it, and he believed that it did happen there. We have evidence that soon after the birth of Jesus, the Romans put a temple there, probably to discourage Christian worship, and certainly after that, the site was made a Christian church. So those are the things we know from the earliest times, and all of the sites in the Holy Land. We're fairly sure that they are the places because we have these ancient churches that go back and they can be dated right from the 1st century, 2nd century certainly. So we know these are the real locations.
And I know that on Christmas Eve there's a big celebration, of course, in Bethlehem, and it's by invitation only because that area is a very small area there where Mass can be said.
It's a very small area, and it's a part of the West Bank, and there's political problems, so it is a rather restrained celebration, but a happy one.
How are you going to celebrate Christmas?
Well, this year I have, on Christmas Eve, I have a Mass at 5:30, another one at midnight in Howard Beach, the two different parishes there. In between, we'll get a little dinner with the two pastors, which gives us a chance to relax. And then the next day I have a Mass again at Guardian Angel, which is another parish. These are the parishes hit by the hurricane. That's why I'm going there. And then I'll probably go to my family in Jersey and celebrate Christmas Day with them.
And I understand there was a wonderful Christmas party at Russo's the other day for the children who were displaced.
I saw it on the net. That's how I know what happened. It was great. I mean, they looked so happy. They were really excited. That was a wonderful thing that he did, donated the party, and that was a wonderful thing, and bring them all together, and they felt solidarity and some happiness in the midst of their problems.
And another related story was the great Christmas concert at Carnegie Hall the other day.
Oh.
Wasn't that wonderful?
It was great. It really was spectacular, a packed house. The New York tenors came together for the event. Were very good, entertaining, regular music and Christmas music, and a little bit of humor, which was good, and it was a very, very nice, pleasant evening.
Yeah, it was good, and of course it's related because that money is going to scholarships.
That's right. It's going to scholarships for the children in the Catholic schools that were affected. There's 1,700 children that were in the schools that were closed and now reopened, thank God. But we're trying to make sure they can stay in these schools because tuition payment for these families is going to be an issue, and that's why we're asking help for that.
So we've had some tough times, but Christmas is a time to try to get beyond that.
That's true.
So we wish you a very Merry Christmas, Bishop, and thanks again for being with us.
Same to you, Ed. Bye.
And Christmas is the time for lighting the Christmas tree, regardless of what Lincoln Chaffee says. In Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, movie star and New Yorker Danny Aiello knows it's a Christmas tree.
3, 2, 1.
The tree is outside St. Athanasius Church. They also lit a beautiful nativity scene. Monsignor David Casado, the pastor of St. Athanasius, said the Christmas celebrations are a welcome relief from the hurricane.
A lot of our brothers and sisters are suffering tonight, and we're trying to spread a little joy in our own parish and maybe bring that to others tonight as we continue in our preparation for Christmas.
Which is now just 4 days away, if you can believe it. Up next, a new Secretary of State and maybe a new saint as Currents continues after the break. Welcome back. A new and very sad survey out of Denmark tonight. 1 of every 6 babies killed in late-term abortions are alive. The study covered abortions performed between the 12th and 22nd weeks of pregnancy, and 1/6 of the babies showed some signs of struggling for life before they were killed. The Danish Midwives Society says, quote, "It's not a major problem." Well, for Brooklyn native and candidate for sainthood Dorothy Day, her abortion was a big problem in her life, and in her struggles, Dorothy often turned to the saints.
I remember one time when I was at the Catholic Worker, an issue of Time magazine came out around Christmas time with the heading Saints for Our Time. And it had, I think, a picture of Mother Teresa on the cover. And inside it had a list of other people who were possible saints of our time, including Dorothy Day. And she said, when they call you a saint, basically it means you're not to be taken seriously. Now, Dorothy took saints extremely seriously.
So Dorothy, she read not just the lives of the saints, but also the writings of the saints. Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Lisieux, John of the Cross, St. Francis. I mean, she took that stuff to heart, and that became her daily bread.
It was not for her just someone on a Hall of Fame or Catholic trading cards or something. Her whole life was spent in dialogue with saints, that is to say, mediating figures who showed in their own time, embodied the challenge of faithfulness. And the Catholic Worker was filled with quotations from the saints, pictures of the saints. Dorothy wrote a book about St. Therese of Lisieux. These were people who were intimate companions for her. So she didn't herself feel that it was trivializing to make someone a saint. In fact, emphasized the idea that we are all called to be saints. She didn't think that the saints were just people that we revered, but they were our companions, you know, and examples who challenged us on our own journey toward holiness. And to be holy, meaning not to be perfect, not to be canonized, not to have a church named after us, but to be the person that God created us to be, to put off the old person, to put on Christ. And she saw that as an ongoing task that lasts the whole lifetime. So when she was concerned that people calling her a saint while she was alive, that was a way of putting her on a pedestal, of saying, well, Dorothy can do those things. She's a saint, you know, after all. But for the rest of us, you know, this is, it's inspiring, but it doesn't really challenge me or speak to me, because I can't do that kind of thing. I could never live with the poor. I could never go to jail. I could never speak out in this way. I'm not like that. And Dorothy would have none of that kind of thing, and she hated it when people would sort of, you know, idealize her. She was very human. She was very aware of her own flaws, her own capacity for anger, for resentments, for bitterness. She struggled with these things. She brought them to confession. Her whole life was an effort to work on these issues, to grow closer to Christ.
Our lives are full of contradiction. And, you know, she stated, don't call me a saint. I don't want to be dismissed that easily. And she also said, we're all called to be saints. But I also see the hand of God pushing her in a direction that she didn't necessarily choose or understand at the time. I mean, there were other things that she would have rather have done. But in the end, it was very clear that her life took the direction that it took, you know, because she responded to hearing the voice of God.
The process for approving Dorothy Day's cause for sainthood has begun. Many steps lay ahead, but last month, the U.S. bishops voted in favor of advancing her cause. And a vote to approve John Kerry as the next U.S. Secretary of State is set for next month. Today, President Obama selected the Massachusetts senator to succeed Hillary Clinton as the nation's top diplomat. The Senate must approve the nomination. Up next, a review of the week as Currents continues after the break. This week has definitely been a hard one. While we won't be with you on Monday or Tuesday, NET is planning special nativity programming, but just a couple of thoughts before we go. Satan, the epitome of evil, was beaten back this week by angels and heroines, by brave people in a tiny New England town, and of course, by the cross. We also spent time this week looking at the life of Dorothy Day. She was born in a big town, Brooklyn, New York. Her early years were troubled. There was even an abortion. But by the mercy and grace of God, her life changed. Tonight, the cardinals and bishops of America think she should be a saint. So we should have hope. We must have hope. On Tuesday, a child will be born in Bethlehem. Merry Christmas.